All right. Welcome, everyone. It is Sunday, July 9, 2023. We are here and at Clearwater in Florida. We're having a presentation with wonderful people around the world. And in this case, we have our guest speaker for today, Mr. Mark Townsend. But right before we get to our speaker for today, we want to do a quick introduction for next week. Next week, we're going to have a special subject that we don't always get to have very often. The Bible is pretty important today, too, which we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about just one sneak peek on the presentation for next week. Hello, Hereditary Chief Phil Jr. Welcome.
Yes.
Can you tell us just a little bit about what's going on today? What's so special today? What's special about this day right here, right now?
Well, as you know, there's
I'm sorry. Could you? I muted you by accident. I was muting myself, but I muted you. I'm so sorry. As I know what?
no problem at all. But maybe before, just say a quick prayer before we begin.
Sure, by all means.
God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of knowledge and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper in the Lord. Haulimi chante washte alo, shunkmano hemeyado, chinupasapa medo, haulimi chante washte. So, looking forward to hearing this wonderful presentation today. As we know, there's prophecies everywhere on Mother Earth from all spiritual traditions that foretell and foretold this day we're living in. And it's no different here across the Americas. We had many visionaries that saw this day, from Black Elk here to the north, Sweet Medicine, the Peacemaker, many others. But to the south, they had their prophecies as well. And one of those is the prophecy of the reunion of the condor and eagle. And in 1 second, there's the condor and eagle. And that was fulfilled literally today, 52 years ago today, July 9th, 1971, where in fact the prophecy of the coming together of the condor and eagle was fulfilled. And then it said when that happened, then the indigenous people of the Americas would come together. And so today, 52 years later, July 9th, 1971, when this happened at Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, where the 16-month process of transferring this prophecy was fulfilled in Lake Titicaca and all the sacred places. So at that point, and I'll just finish it with this, of course, it says that when the condor and eagle come together, then the indigenous peoples of the Americas will come together. The challenge, of course, was that in Central America, there's not eagles and condors, are not their birds, nor in the Amazon. So as we begin to move into the Central America, first it was a condor, and then we thought maybe it was a boa, and then it came out to be the quetzal. Quetzal is their bird. Then when we've been really doing a lot of work in the Amazon, then it came out across the Amazon as we work with indigenous people across the Amazon. It was the hummingbird. That's their bird. So today, the first council of the union of the condor, hummingbird, quetzal, and eagle will have its first meeting. It was elected in Palenque, Mexico on March 21st, 2023. And then today it'll be the first meeting. And this council, by the way, was elected. The electoral processes are drawn from the administrative order in terms of how it's elected. It turns out that this council has 13 members, 7 women, 6 men, and 2 facilitators, that is 2 chairpersons. male and female. So this is actually happening today, exactly to the very day 52 years ago on Lake Titicaca, where this prophecy was fulfilled. And that's what I would like to reflect on. Which, by the way, goes down to into Ecuador. You're going to have this wonderful presentation down into the Amazon there, and into the Andes there in Ecuador. We have some members of our council from Ecuador, Amazon. So I'll just say that much, and then I'm looking forward to hearing this beautiful prophecies coming up, biblical prophecies. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a nice coming together because we're here to talk about biblical prophecy, and then here we come across an indigenous prophecy fulfilled, and you're going to a meeting that's going to be about this today. It was a very, very prudent subject. We're going to be having Hereditary Chief Phil Jr. join us next Sunday at 11 a.m. We're going to be speaking about quite a few topics. If you're interested in indigenous cultures of Americas, and of course, Baha'i subjects, well, next week is going to be a special week for that. We welcome all of you.
And by the way, this is directly fulfills the prophecy in the tablets of the divine plan. In terms
so
of
the tablets of the divine plan written by Abdul Baha to the Americas.
Yeah, to the Americas, in which he states, and by the way, it's the same place that was revealed at the Shrine of Baha'u'llah, where he says that, through education and so forth, the indigenous people of the Americas shall become so illumined, they shall enlighten the entire world. And that's the prophecy. And this is actually now, we can see it happening. And as we know, the Baha'is are not going to be leading the lesser peace, but certainly if indigenous people have a role to play in the greater peace, they certainly have a role to play in the lesser peace. And I think that's what's happening is indigenous people's teachings are people are being drawn to them, and they're talking about oneness, the oneness of humanity, the oneness of life, and so forth. Anyway, we can get into further. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may,
Thank you so much.
if I may add here onto what Chief Phil said, I've lived 8 years in Ecuador and my wife 10 years, and we are in a town that is predominantly Quechua.
Mhm.
So instead of being a minority, the indigenous are the majority here. And they observe the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes. And we just had the summer solstice, which is called Inti Raymi. And on March 21st, which is Nowruz for Baha'is, it's Pakar Raymi here in Ecuador. And they speak the same language of the Inca. They may have had a different language before, but the Inca imposed the Quechua language. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what Inti Raymi was like. Imagine all the villages around the town. It opens up with the men drinking a lot of chicha. Alcohol fuels the whole thing. And they stomp into town, and they call it taking the plaza. And they are calm and serene throughout the whole year. But on Inti Raymi, it's like they're reminding the country who is here first. And they make as much noise as they can with horns and flutes, and they're stomping in unison, and it shakes the houses. It's an awesome thing to watch. If they wanted to be an army, they could, but it's not a militaristic thing. It's a pride thing, and I would love to see the coming together of Pakar Raymi and Nowruz, because they both are the vernal equinox. I mean, the spring equinox. Yeah. So if you have any questions about that, I would stress that I have trouble seeing any spiritual vision in this, because they're so drunk that they're falling down and their wives are coming behind to pick them up. And we put a sign in front of our house saying, no urination here. And they do it anyway. So I have conflicting feelings about how I fit in or what's going to come of this, but I have no doubt about the prophecies that Phil has mentioned, that they will lead us spiritually in ways that we may not be able to imagine yet. I'm sure it has to do with the environment, about appreciating the environment, and that is really important here.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to say that that was so strange because it was March 21st, 2023, that the actual election of the council occurred in Palenque on that date. But it was a whole different thing there, where there was the whole ceremonies. The equinox ceremony was completely, of course, in sobriety there at Palenque at one of the Mayan temples, and also that being in Bolivia, you are in Ecuador back in 1970s, early 70s. The drinking of chicha was not something that how do I say it, where everybody got so drunk they did, conducted themselves that way. It was kind of a symbolic thing on very prescribed days. But I know that in time, that will all be evaporated as people understand more and more about how that affects our spirituality. So I'll just say that much, and I'm really looking forward. Please, thank you.
Well, concerning the prophecies, you sent me a list of 8 subjects, and I would really prefer to respond to your questions. The problem with me here is that all of my material is in my office, but I have to use my wife's computer for the Zoom because I have no video on my computer. I can't do Zoom on it. And so does anyone have any questions right off that we could start? I have things to share with you, but I want to see where the audience is. John?
So yeah. So just as an introduction, and this has not been our typical start for a presentation. Maybe ever. No, we had one with Rainn Wilson. We had something with him, and then it went to another place entirely. So actually, this is the second time. What we have here, we have Mr. Mark Townsend with us, our presenter this week, and the subject today is unlocking the mysteries, exploring biblical time prophecies, questions and answers. Well, here's the thing. We just talked about a prophecy similarly relating to time among the indigenous peoples in the Americas. And again, next week we'll have quite a bit on that subject of the indigenous peoples and prophecy and whatnot. This week today, we have our speaker, Mark Townsend, returning to speak about biblical prophecies and the fulfillment of these prophecies with the emergence of the Baha'i message. And be it you're looking for the return of Jesus Christ or the return of Krishna, around the world, the religions, doesn't matter what part of the planet, they've been prophesizing a time of great need, a time of greatness, a time of immense change. Well, we are living through that immense change as a human family. We are being united in ways that we never thought possible. We are right now speaking on Zoom with people across national boundaries, and we're so happy to have our guest speaker from a nation just south of where we are here in the United States, on the Southern Hemisphere, though. So with that being said, we welcome Mr. Townsend. He has here, I don't know if it shows Jeremiah, you can correct me. It shows his wife's name, Jennifer Munns, but that's That's Mark. So for anyone who's confused, I got confused in the beginning. Sorry, Mark.
Right,
But
I'm using her computer.
yeah, he explained that. So I want to get straight to the points of the beautiful quotes. Jeremiah, do you have the imagery? Did you set anything up?
I have his presentation that he gave, and so if he wants to do the last time he was here, if he wants to do a quick recap of that presentation, we can go through that real quick, and then we could just jump into the specific quotes that you brought up. But I don't have those quotes in a slide.
Okay, so we'll have to go to Facebook and pull them up. Got it. Thank you. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's share one of the pieces from the previous presentation. Thanks. With that being said, let me pull this up. There we go. All right, so we're on a slide here. What are biblical criteria for determining the authenticity of a claimant to prophethood using mathematical prophecies in the Bible? What is that?
I would say that the most important is the 7 times. The last half of which are 3.5 times in the Muslim dispensation. And it's referred to different ways in Daniel and the book of Revelation. It's originally in the Pentateuch that Moses is warning the Jews that if they revert to idolatry, he will punish them 7 times. And Abdu'l-Baha explains this in some answered questions. A time is 360 days, a biblical year. It's kind of a compromise between the solar and the lunar year, like the degrees of a circle. 7 times 360 is 2,520 years. And if you look at it on the lunar side or the solar side, they both come out to 1844. And if I had to reduce it to one number, it would be 1260, which is mentioned twice in the book of Revelation in chapter 11, verse 3, and chapter 12, verse 6. That is telling you exactly what the year will be in the Muslim calendar when the Mahdi Bab would arise in the year 1260. And this is, the Shia know about it. The Sunni are not so concerned about that. There we go. Thank you. So if Iran, which is Shia, has rejected their own prophecy about 1260, they had authentic traditions where the questioner said, at what time will the promised one appear? And the answer is in the year 60. And the Quran says 1,000 years after the last Imam, the last divinely guided one, 1,000 lunar years would elapse from 260 until the year 1260. And then you had a repeat of what the Jews saw. There are so many similarities here I might get to later between Jesus as Messiah and the Bab as the Mahdi of Islam. there's like 20 different corresponding similarities. So you've seen some of the Baha'is have created t-shirts that say 1844 is 1260 is one of the Baha'i era. And all we can do is give people this information. Some people will respond to it intensely, and other people will pass right on by. It is not of importance to them. So we have to be aware that some people will respond to it, and some people won't. But if anybody has questions about these numbers right here, let's bring it up now. You can see that 1260 is half of the time 2520, which is an interesting number in itself. It's even in the Octos when it comes to the bequeathing of wills and disposition of an estate. That number is also used again. Another way 1260 is expressed is 3.5 years or 42 months. And so it's important to bring these together and present them to Christians who might be receptive. And that's all I can say about that right now, unless there are questions. We can go to another slide. It's a titanic subject to me because it encompasses the Judeo-Christian tradition and Islamic. This is what will help bring those religions together. In my work on Facebook, I see that the religions are at war with each other, intellectually, militarily. Even within each religion, there are so many differences and denominations. And here is this common denominator that will be instrumental in the lesser peace or the most great peace, and the Holy Land becoming the land of unity, as he refers to it in the fire tablet. He calls Israel the land of unity. So it's coming, but I'm not able to see how or when, and I don't think any of us are. Any questions?
So, Mark, one of the questions I have is, this is specifically describing the 7 times tribulation, right? And the Gentile rule over Israel. That's what this prophecy is all about. It's about when the Jews will finally return to the Holy Land.
Yes. There's the Edict of Toleration, which was supposedly passed in 1844, pressing the Turkish government to allow Jews to settle in the Holy Land. But I hear the 7 times often referred to as 7 years of tribulation that people think is coming, where in actuality it's over. It finished in 1844 when the Bab arose, and he created a new calendar, actually the most accurate and divine calendar that we've ever had. And so when you hear Christians talk about the 7 years of tribulation, they look at it in a political way, a military way, and we need to try to direct their attention to the whole scale from the time of Moses. And when Jesus undertook his mission, he stood up in the synagogue and read from Isaiah about proclaiming the acceptable year of the Lord. And I think that in the mind of Jesus, he saw himself much closer to his return in the station of the Father than people can manage nowadays. And so he knew that when the everlasting Father came, there would be a new calendar that would even be more harmonious with the cycles of the moon and the sun, with our 19-year calendar. And so here we have this beautiful secret. And Mr. Sears talks about it in Thief in the Night. And here we are in the year 180 of the new calendar. And Iran has not relented. And the nations are getting closer and closer to all-out war. And we have to be so centered and certain that nothing will shake our belief that these prophecies are fulfilled. Anyone else?
So I'm going to share my screen. I made a PowerPoint of some slides that you put on Facebook here, and then we can go back to the PowerPoint that Jeremiah was sharing.
Okay.
So the subject of the slide is made new. This is something you posted on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you share this? Know ye that God will not in this day accept your thoughts, nor your remembrance of him, nor your turning towards him, nor your devotions, nor your vigilance, unless ye be made new in the estimation of this servant. Could ye but perceive it?
Yeah, there are numerous passages like this. If you remember, Abdu'l-Baha talks about I lost my train of thought there. Please forgive me. I'm getting older and I forget stuff. But it's referring to the fact the reality of Baha'u'llah is the promised one of all the prophets of the past. And this phenomena happens every time a messenger comes. It's the theme of Kitab-i-Igan. Why is it the Jews were awaiting Messiah, but then when he came, they rejected him? Why is it the Muslims were waiting for the Mahdi, and then they rejected him? So if they realize this is the reappearance of the Lord that we believed in before, then they will be renewed in a spiritual way. But if they don't recognize him, then it'll only go bad for them.
So you're talking about spiritual alchemy of souls. So like copper to gold, we transform what we are.
Very good. Yeah.
So I from the context of Christian revelation, the context of baptism, being born again, this is the same thing, no?
Right. The master said, we understand now what the meaning of water and the spirit and fire are. And what was symbolic before is not a Baha'i ritual anymore. And yet, if you read the Akdas about washing with water, washing everything with clear water that is not defiled in any way, not polluted or toxic in any way. He speaks a lot about pure water. So we still take baths, we still wash our ablutions, hands and face before prayer, but the way it was in the ceremony of baptism, God didn't see to keep baptism in this dispensation. He can change whatever he likes. So the previous religions, or even people without religion, are in different degrees seeking God, trying to be vigilant and turning towards Him. And every time I get on Facebook, I see people who are calling to some spiritual point, calling to our obligation to God. But the fact is, if it doesn't involve the most great name, it's not complete. So we have to remind them that Christ promised He would have a new name. And we know what that name is, but when other people hear about it, 99% of the time, they reject Baha'u'llah. I'm sure you have all experienced that. Because every day I see people say, there is no name higher than Jesus. But He says He will have a new name. Jesus is not a new name. It's a form of Yeshua, Joshua. And many men have that name. Nobody else has the name Baha'u'llah. There's only one. And everywhere in the Old and New Testament, it says He will come in the glory of God, the glory of the Lord, the glory of the Father. He's telling us what the new name will be.
Well, there's a question here, and inevitably it has to do with fear. A lot of people fear this apocalypse as they see it, that is, in essential terms, unanimous with the coming of the return of Jesus Christ. The day of resurrection has so many names around the world. Religious teachings around the world have this apocalyptic vision of the end of the world. It's a common theme for the world's messages. And going to the concept from the biblical texts and the Baha'i texts, we are exposed to the concept of the fear of God, but when we look at the text itself, it doesn't seem to be at all what we are seeing from popular opinion, from popular ideas, from what even historians who are supposed to be doctors on TV, going on TV channels, would talk about. You go to History Channel, they still show apocalyptic visions. It seems to me that I see here something completely different. The definition, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogancy. And the evil way and the froward mouth do I hate. Proverbs. Baha'u'llah says, the fear of God impelleth man to hold fast to that which is good and shun all evil. So just starting off on the subject of fear of God, it seems very, very different.
I felt so strongly about this that I started a Facebook group called Fear of God, because I kept encountering people who said, why should I fear God? Doesn't He love me? Well, if anybody has ever had a girlfriend or a boyfriend that they dearly loved, they would never want to do anything to displease them. They would want to do what would make them happy. And just take that and magnify it and focus it towards God.
And this is actually a very unique concept, because there's this concept in any religion, which is very unique. It's that we are to fear God and no one else. So I think that a lot of people forget that when you fear God, you don't fear anyone. So this concept of fear of another human being, fear of another outcome, cannot exist if you fear God, because the concept is requiring fear of God only and not fear of anyone else. Right. So there's this concept, we Baha'is have spoken about attachment to God, detachment from everyone else. And that concept, you see a lot in the writings, but no one I've found has really delved on the subject of fear of God, meaning You only fear God. You don't fear someone who will kill you even for your belief in God. You only fear God and God alone. And then I see these quotes here that you shared in front of me. God is love. With his love, he will calm all your fears. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. Every man is guided both by the love of God and by the fear of God. Love is a light that never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear. And to come back to you, Mark, fear of God is mentioned 16 times in the Kitab Aqdas, paragraphs 30, 37, 73, 76, 107, 120, and so on, all the way to 190, 16 times, as it's shown here on our image. Now, we just went through these quotes, and logically, if fear cannot abide in the same context as love, because again, there's no fear in love, where we're taught as Baha'is this teaching to love God, the love of God, and to fear that we'll lose God's love, which doesn't happen, but still that's a fear that we have of what if God sees, our beloved God sees us commit a bad act. My question to you is this: how does this work? How has religion, not just Baha'u'llah now, but how has religion shown us the fear of God, and where did we go wrong? Why are we so confused?
Well, let's turn away from these terms love and fear for a moment and use another context. In many places, Baha'u'llah says, center your thoughts in the well-beloved rather than in your own selves. So this may be a good thing to remember when we're meditating and when we're praying, that existentially, there is only God. We are contingent. We are like dependent insects compared to God. And our bodies come and pass away really quickly, and all that remains for eternity is God. So a person of faith who believes in God would do everything they can to draw near to God, to seek the good pleasure of God. And I have a prayer by the Bab that I would like to share today, but I'd have to get up and go get it in a minute. In which, with total dedication and devotion, we seek the good pleasure of God. Because, well, if you allow me, I'll get this prayer.
So while Mark does that, just a quick point. Again, we're talking about prophecy, accepting prophecy. We're talking about the age-old subjects that are contained or associated with prophecies of the world. And the subject of fear typically comes up, especially when people fear the judgment of God, the wrath, the end of the world, as people call it. Well, we're trying to get to it right now. It's not really an end, is it?
Okay, this is part of a prayer from the Bab. All that I beg of thee, O my God, is to enable me, ere my soul departeth from my body, to attain thy good pleasure, even were it granted to me for a moment, tinier than the infinitesimal fraction of a mustard seed. For if it departeth while thou art pleased with me, then I shall be free from every concern or anxiety. But if it abandoneth me while thou art displeased with me, then even had I wrought every good deed, none would be of any avail. And had I earned every honor and glory, none would serve to exalt me. I earnestly beseech thee then, O my God, to graciously bestow thy good pleasure upon me, when thou dost cause me to ascend unto thee and make me appear before thy holy presence. Inasmuch as thou hast from everlasting been the God of immense bounty unto the people of thy realm, and the Lord of most excellent gifts to all that dwell in the exalted heaven of thine omnipotence. So this prayer is so important to me because it doesn't matter how good you were in your life. I mean, it does in one aspect, but here he's saying that you could have done every good thing, and at the last instant of your life, as your soul is leaving the body, we don't know if God will be pleased with us or not. In the Agon, he says, none knoweth what his own end will be. So that's where faith comes in. And I try to explain to people that our minds, our human brains, cannot comprehend God. But somehow succeeding civilizations are based on faith. And faith is a faculty that God also gave us. In some people, it has utterly been undeveloped. And in other people, they are calm and serene, and they rely upon God to be fair. Why would people fear God if he's fair? If he's absolutely just and good and merciful, then you can rely on him. He's not going to do you wrong.
Perhaps it's a matter of this fear that God is watching when you commit a wrong, and that fear that he will see be the reason you don't commit the wrong. Would that be more appropriate?
We obviously need to study the attributes of God. If we can see, God can see. If we are have any virtue at all, it comes because God had it first. And I'm just stunned, when I think how grateful I am to know about the faith and try to inform others about it and try to develop the administrative order and gather libraries for the future and develop the Baha'i Center. Whatever we do with a heart devoted to God, we know will be productive. That's all I can say about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So for all of you who are seeing this, Mark had compiled these quotes. There's a little more we're going to go to, but just remember, it's mentioned 16 times in the Kitab Aqdas. It means a lot. And I know that I, for one, growing up, did not really learn about what that meant. In retrospect, yes, I did. A leapfrog analogy, as in I never went and looked as to the foundation of why I was taught what I was taught. But I'm saying to you that if you look at religious history and you see the love of God, it's in a very direct sense synonymous with the fear of God, but not in the way of how we view fear as a life-ending feeling that your life will end, therefore you feel fear, or you're going to get hurt, or a retribution or punishment. This fear is not the fear that is abiding in the same heart of one who loves God. It's a different kind of fear, and it's something that many do not see. And it's extremely important that as we remember that religion redefines what things mean, it redefines the meaning of life. It's so too redefines the meaning of fear. And in this case, fearing no one but God is a concept that holds us to a standard where we don't just change our opinion because everyone else around us changes their opinion. We don't just engage in a mob because people got together in a mob to go kill someone. We think for ourselves. We think, what would God want us to do, versus doing simply what someone else told you to do or your peers pressure you to do. It's a very interesting topic. So with that being said, we have these quotes from Baha'u'llah himself. And of course, it's important we say things in our own words where there's complex concepts. Memorizing quotes are great, but I'm going to read the first quote above. This is from Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Iqan. Thus hath God laid hold of them for their sins, hath extinguished in them the spirit of faith, and tormented them with the flames of the nethermost fire. And this for no other reason except that Israel refused to apprehend the meaning of such words as have been revealed in the Bible concerning the signs of the coming revelation. To them that are endowed with understanding, it is clear and manifest that when the fire of the love of Jesus consumed the veils of Jewish limitations and his authority was made apparent and partially enforced, he, the revealer of the unseen beauty, addressing one day his disciples, referred unto his passing and kindling in their hearts the fire of bereavement, said unto them, I go away and come again unto you. That's full of meaning. I go away and come again unto you. So Jesus promising the return. But prior to that, explaining this God in this light. What is this? What are we seeing? It says in the next quote, wherefore must the veils of the satanic self be burned away in the fire of love, that the spirit may be cleansed and refined, and thus may apprehend the station of him, but for whom the world would not have been created. Kindle the fire of love and burn away all things. Then set thy foot into the land of the lovers. And another burning bush reference. O people of justice, be as brilliant as the light and as splendid as the fire that blazed in the burning bush. The brightness of the fire of your love will no doubt fuse and unify the contending peoples and kindreds of the earth, whilst the fierceness of the flame of enmity and hatred cannot but result in strife and ruin. We beseech God that he may shield his creatures from the evil designs of his enemies. He verily hath power over all things. So the more we read, the more we see fleshing out of this power of God. We see not per se a God of wrath, which we just saw in the first quote. It says here, who is that, in the fourth quote, who is there that can put out the light which the snow white hand of God hath lit? Where is he to be found that hath the power to quench the fire which hath been kindled through the might of thy Lord, the all-powerful, the all-compelling, the almighty? It is the hand of divine might that hath extinguished the flames of dissension. Powerful is he to do which he pleaseth. He saith, be, and it is. Kun fayakun.
Yeah,
So-
fire is used in different ways. Some negative, some positive. And I want to refer to nuclear war a little bit here because it seems to be becoming more and more probable. And people are thinking that God is afflicting us with that. No, Baha'u'llah didn't want that. He warned about it before it was even discovered. And it will be us that does it. It will be us that will have neglected the beautiful biosphere that we're living in. And I hope to God he protects the biosphere, because obviously we're not going to wipe ourselves out. We know that the Baha'i dispensation goes on, and the Baha'i cycle stretches so far into the future, I can't even imagine. So the Guardian said the immediate future is distressingly dark, but the far future is glorious. And I would much rather be positive and encouraging people than saying, oh, let's just hang it up. It's all over. It's not. It's not over. But it's going to play out here very soon in the Holy Land, with wars all over the planet. And I'm frustrated that it has to do that, but it seems inevitable, because our worldly leaders are not centered on God. It's a materialistic world we're living in, and something has to happen to really get people's attention. Does anyone else have thoughts about that?
Questions, comments? Oh, Sharon.
Of course. Just two things. Here in our country, in regards to Indigenous celebrations, less alcohol and more family time. It's Matariki, which is, our New Year. The other thing is about this, there was a conversation repeated by Hooper Dunbar between the beloved guardian and Enoch Olinga concerning the state of this hell end of the planet. And the hell end of this planet is about the fact that we are still engaged in war and killing each other. And the beloved guardian spoke about this. So what I'm saying is, though we may have to pass through these inevitable crises, that of course the outcome in the future is glorious. And part of that centered on the fact that even God does not rob humanity of its free will. And one of the huge issues we have around that, and I've looked at all these quotations and prophecies and so on, and I thought to myself, the mind of man, which is, like mind heart of this revelation, because really it's about transformation, one at a time, and that gift that you get of faith through this revelation is like something that we have never, ever in history experienced before. And the power of that is transformative, given the hell end of the planet, so to speak. So I look at it all and I think if people hadn't had thousands of years of not revelation so much as social conditioning, we wouldn't be seeing such a battle of minds. The revelation of God is in the heart mind of human beings, because that's where the seed of faith grows. And I think a lot of people get caught up into trying to intellectualize and use their minds and not engaging the balance of heart and mind. Just a thought. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sharon.
There's a quote from the Dawnbreakers from the address of the Bab, the herald to Baha'u'llah, also declaring himself a manifestation of God, the next manifestation of God after Islam and preceding Baha'u'llah. He says, "Ye are even as the fire which in the darkness of the night has been kindled upon the mountaintop. Let your light shine before the eyes of men. Let your light shine before the eyes of men." These quotes here where Baha'u'llah says, to them that are endowed with understanding, it is clear and manifest that when the fire of the love of Jesus consumed the veils of Jewish limitations and his authority was made apparent and partially enforced, he, the revealer of the unseen beauty, addressing one day his disciples, referred unto his passing, and kindling in their hearts the fire of bereavement, said unto them, I go away and come again unto you. This is a sentence. This isn't a piece. This isn't you separate it out and it means different things. It means something together. And where Baha'u'llah is speaking in the Kitab-i-Iqan, where he writes in the Kitab-i-Iqan, this concept of the love of Jesus, the fire of the love of Jesus, consuming the veils of Jewish limitations, and ending with this quote, I go away and come unto you and come again unto you. This is reference in this case to the love of God that guided the people to accept Jesus when Jesus Christ had first brought revelation. And again, in the second quote we read, the satanic self being burned away in the fire of love. And again, in the third quote, that we are embodying this love, that we become that fire so bright that we are brighting as if we were the fire on the burning bush. The burning bush, that fire is kindled within us. And then the idea of enkindling our souls with this light. The last quote, which is big and in bold. Where is he to be found that hath the power to quench the fire, which hath been kindled through the might of thy Lord, the all-powerful, the all-compelling, the almighty? That's a question. I'd like to address that to everyone. Eileen, please, I see you raised your hand. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Actually, this is from about 5 minutes back. Start video. Okay, this is from a few minutes ago. It's terribly difficult. It has been for me to read the newspapers. And the Ukraine war really tore me up. And that's just one example. And then what came to me is humanity does things the hard way. For thousands of years, we have not chosen what you might call the easy way, brought by prophets of God. They've been rejected and we've done everything the hard way. But God still has a plan. And I think of the terrible things that are happening, especially the war, the Ukrainian war, as somehow part of the plan of God. And if we can think of that as much of a solace as possible, because somehow that's going to bring humanity to a new level of military aggression is wrong, case closed. And then as a biblical searcher myself, one thing that keeps coming back to me about how the Jews rejected Jesus. Well, that happened, but God still had a plan. You might call it Plan B or Plan C. Within 40 years, give or take a year or two after Jesus was crucified, the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. What did that accomplish? Well, it put an absolute end to the Jewish rituals of animal sacrifice. And this had to happen one way or another. For the progress of the world, And we can't ever go back to sacrificing animals. That was an outward manifestation of something that needed to be internalized along with man's growth and transformation, I should say humanities. So anyway, these are just a couple of thoughts. Times are very difficult, and we do need to really hit the writings. I just read Dawnbreakers from beginning to end again, and that was quite an eye-opener. And remember, this is God's world. He's got an infinite number of plans. No matter how much we mess things up, he has a comeback, and it's all for our good. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mark.
Yes, Eileen. When we talk about Russia and Ukraine, it's personal for me because I went there in
Ah.
1991. We went on a teaching trip through Ukraine at a
Right.
time when there was a window open of opportunity to freely teach the faith.
Yes.
And now I want to mention the United Nations, how it was a step beyond the League of Nations, but still it failed to do something in the time that it has existed, and that is to create what Abdu'l-Baha called a sacred global security pact.
Yes.
What we contented ourselves with was NATO and other blocs.
Mm-hmm.
And so Russia had quite some good reason after its culture of being attacked many times throughout history, something the US doesn't understand. In the same way, I mean, the British came again in 1812, but other than that, we have been protected by two oceans, whereas the Mongols and the Nazis and Napoleon and others attacked Russia, and it didn't want NATO coming up to its border. And I don't see anything really coming out of the UN right now except Robert's Rules of Order.
Well,
Russia is actually the president of the UN Security Council.
exactly. And as long as you have the Security Council set up, and especially with Russia on it, nothing positive can come out of that situation. And, geopolitically, I try not to get too involved in the geopolitics of situations. But I think what we're going to see is the crumbling of one of the last empires on earth. And Russia has traditionally been an empire. And it only half collapsed with the collapse of the Soviet Union. But at heart, it's still trying to be an empire. And maybe maybe that's one piece of God's plan. We, in this country, since we can't pick up a rifle and go fight, and Baha'u'llah would not approve of that anyway, at least coming from us here in the States, we just have to keep an awful lot in mind and have faith that this is heading somewhere positive. And also when it comes to death, to us it's horrifying. 200,000, 300,000. How many soldiers have been killed in this war? And yet we know that death is liberation. The soul goes to the worlds of God. Death is a messenger of joy to us. It is what Baha'u'llah said. And if we can just keep that in mind, death is a messenger of joy. I lost my son to kidney cancer, but he came back in a couple of dreams, and he's doing very, very well over there. Death was a messenger of joy for him. we have to keep that faith firmly.
John, how much time do we have left?
It's 12:11. We have a hard stop at 12:30. So
Okay.
19 minutes to actually stop, but we can stop whenever.
Alapa,
Um,
John, can I say something?
Yes, welcome. Hello.
Alapa, I would like to say we, the Baha'is, have to focus about how to be like a candle shining throughout the whole world. And in order to do that, we need to deepen ourselves. We need to focus on positive things in life, rather than looking at what the old world order is going to happen. We know is going to be destroyed. The old world order is all gone. But what we have to do, we have to focus on positive things about Baha'i laws and what we can bring into the society to promote the laws into people that we meet, or to the our community that we meet. So it's like we are in a boat, that we are in the ocean. In the ocean, we got sharks, we got dolphins, we got all kinds of fishes. They eat each other, they kill each other, whatever they do. But the boat is going straight in the path of where the destination is. And the boat doesn't care what's happening out there. It's going into the focus, into goal that is destined for us. And what is destined for us? To spread the teachings, teach the people how they learn the 12 principles of Baha'i faith and the virtues of God. And the ones that they want to hear, they're going to be Baha'i. And there's ones that are maybe didn't hear of Baha'u'llah, but they are practicing it on the name of Jesus Christ, on the name of a Jew, Moses, or anybody. There are good people out there. And we need to search to get all those good people that are working for the community, that are trying to promote the, good thing to their life, to everyone. And that's what we have to focus on. So I would say everything is destined by Baha'u'llah, what is going to happen. And it's inevitable is going to happen. The peace is inevitable. Now, how do we get to the peace? It's going to be hardship, it's going to be obstacles, but you're going to get there. So I would say, instead of focusing what's happening in the world, instead of focusing watching TV of the news and everything, most of it which is propaganda, and we need to focus about what do we do to unite each other? What do we need to do to unite our family? What do we do to unite our community, our Baha'i community? How do we do to reach out to the other people so we shine so much, that we love each other so much, that it's going to spread to our neighbors and our community, that these people are different. And that's how people are going to come to the Baha'i faith. And this is what we have to focus on. We have to focus on positive aspects of life, not negative. And in order to be successful on any agenda and anything we should do, is to be focused what is the Baha'i way to do, not what is the business way to do, not what is best for me. I'm working outside. I don't care about me. I have to care about what I can do for my community. What can I do for this person that I'm meeting today that is best for that person, not for me? And if we have that kind of mindset, then we can change the world. We can change ourselves. And I'm sorry I talk too much, but this is
Thank you for reframing. So this is actually some of the quotes that we were planning to discuss right here. We have a roadmap, and Abdul Baha, in a very clear way, in 3 quotes, and thanks, Mark, for sharing this on your group, Fear of God. Abdul Baha explains a piece of how to do that. I say a piece, it's pretty much everything, but you have to elaborate on this to understand what it means if you don't understand it already. So from the very beginning, undoubtedly, indubitably, All virtues have a center and source. That source is God, from whom all these bounties emanate. Only the spirit is real. Everything else is as shadow. All bodies are disintegrated in the end. Only reality subsists. All physical perfections come to an end, but the divine virtues are infinite. And importantly here, the prophets teach us that the only way to approach God is by characterizing ourselves with the attributes of divinity. So there you have it. All this that's going on, we really need to focus on our virtue. We need to focus on the attributes of divinity, because as is said in the middle quote, only the spirit is real, everything else is as shadow. Well, if you feel that everything around you is real, well, the spirit is even more real than that. So that should be a matter of relativity. If you measure the physical world around you, you can feel a ball hit you on the head. Well, your spiritual reality is all the more real. Getting hit in the head with a ball is a very, very soft hit compared to getting hit spiritually with something. So let's think of it in the context of relativity. If something is a shadow and you feel that it's very real, this world around us, this matrix that we live in, well, the question is, how much more real is the spirit if this is just a shadow of the spirit realm? That being said, this idea of why we exist here, the spirit, that is the fundamental emanating force that is where we're getting the word of God from. It's not, we're not getting it because it's writing on paper merely. We're getting it because there's a spiritual inspiration. There's a spiritual source. There's something that's coming from an entity called God. So we're going to go to this next slide, which Mark had shared online. Mark, could you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, one day I just started asking questions and wrote them down like this. And I put the biblical references after them so people can find them and study them again. The list is actually longer now. I'll post the longer list on Fear of God or something. If a claimant to prophethood arises, there are several useful biblical criteria to determine their authenticity and veracity. In Deuteronomy, Moses asked, "Do his prophecies come true?" You would think that simple, direct condition would be what people turn to. There's a Baha'i prophecy website now. I think it's called prophecyfulfilled.com. And it talks about prophecies from all the traditions, Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and indigenous. And if we look at them and we find that so many are fulfilled, I can't see why that doesn't get somebody's attention. But it's really a matter of pulling pieces together for me and creating the puzzle completed. Then he says, does he bear good fruits? This is what Jesus said was an obvious criteria. Did you get good teachings from this, or were they negative and destructive? Does he testify to Christ? Because each one of the messengers we know is going to testify to the others. Does he suffer lashings and exiles from town to town, as Jesus talked about? That's exactly what happened to the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Does he come to Carmel and Achor? Does he summon the Jews back to the Holy Land? Does he come as Prince of Peace and Everlasting Father? Does he establish the white throne judgment? Does he reveal new things? Is his ministry 40 years long? So, well, I know a lot of people don't have time to read the Bible exhaustively, and they may not even know about Achor and why it's named that. If you go back to Joshua, I think it's chapter 7 in Joshua, there was a man in the body of Israelites that were camping, and they were on their way towards the Holy Land, and his name was Achan, and he stole some of the golden ornaments out of the tabernacle. And when they found them in his tent, they executed him and his family. So punishment was pretty strict back then during the establishment of the law. And then the place where that happened was called the Valley of Achor, named after Achan. And Achor is where Akka is now. And the place which was a sign of punishment and an execution for a crime has now become a place for flocks to lie down, for peace and unity, and for absolution of all of our sins, far, far beyond what Christian forgiveness is. And so I was just reading this in Isaiah about Achor, that he will call you to Achor. We know that that's happened, and Carmel is part of that. And these twin cities will become the center of the world. And also for me, the fact that the Jews are back in the Holy Land is the most obvious sign, which should alert people that the promised one is in the world, because he comes first and then calls them. He comes and establishes an ensign, like a flag, that they will see and they will come. And that's what happened in the 19th century. But he also, the distinguishing thing about Baha'i revelation is the universal house of justice. And who established that? It was Baha'u'llah. We didn't make it up after him. He wrote it down in his book in 1873. And then in 1963, 90 years later, it appeared in the world when the first National Assemblies elected the House of Justice. And I don't think that Israel in general is aware of who is in her midst. They're preoccupied with political and military stuff right now. Something will have to happen to attract not just Israel, but the other nations to the House of Justice. And those who come into it are like safe in the ark. And those who don't come into it will suffer longer. So that's about it for that.
Well, thank you so much. These are quotes that were pulled from the Facebook group Fear of God. I wanted to show everyone from the page some of the quotes that Mark has shared. This here is one of them. The prophecies that appear in the Bible, in any holy book around the world, none of them will mean, even if they should mean something, what they should mean to the person who isn't interested in searching. If someone isn't interested in actually engaging with the prophecy, even if it's staring someone in the face, they will not see it. And this fear of God, which truly is the love of God and the fear that he will see us doing aught but his will, is the prime animating force, because we fear no one but God. So there's this concept that people have when they are confronted with prophecy. It is this, that they have a life that they'll have to leave. everything they've known, everyone that is in their community, they do not have support from this world to accept a spiritual message that will completely untether them from what they have known their reality to be. That is requiring sacrifice. But interestingly enough, the greater the sacrifice, the brighter the fire that you enkindle. That sacrifice, if it is made where you're not sacrificing an animal, you're not sacrificing a person, God forbid, a person, you're not sacrificing any particular thing, you are sacrificing the most important concept of all, which is your concept of self. It's not sacrificing who you are and that you are nothing. It's sacrificing who you were and becoming who you were meant to be. And asking that question, why was I created? What's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? What is it that I'm here to do? Why, if someone is so bold to tell me that I'm not doing what I was created to do, what is it that I'm supposedly created to do? Who dares such rattle my ego? Well, that entity can be none other entity than God himself. No other entity can call you to that. And likewise, no entity can call you to fear except God. And there is another one of our speakers here who had mentioned this concept of this genuine fear that the powers of the earth also have when you are only fearing God and no one else. Imagine a world where people feared God only and no one else. They didn't fear you. They didn't fear the police. They don't fear the state. They don't fear a government. They don't fear a king. They don't fear anyone but God. Imagine a world where they followed the law of God, which so happens to tell you to follow the laws of the country. So you do follow the country's laws, but not to fear. Imagine the politician that you are rolling your eyes at that is paid to do something, or you feel has fear to do the right thing. Imagine these people motivated by nothing but their love for God. And they fear no one but God. And in this case, they don't fear God because they love God and they only fear that God will see them do the wrong thing or think the wrong thoughts. Imagine a world where, again, people don't have that fear. They don't fear reprisal. They will do what they believe they have to do. And they are only reasoned with where you reason with them because of your mutual purpose to serve God, not because you, again, are putting fear into their hearts to do something else. That's a world that does not exist. A few men have risen that have been that way. A few men and women have risen that have been motivated by this purpose and sacrificed their lives. And you can see that in the first disciples of Jesus Christ. So I learned apparently they all didn't, not just John the Baptist, but they all met a terrible end actually, and they did it bravely. The Dawnbreakers, which is the early story of the Babi revelation, the Baha'u'llah himself was one of the Babis who during this time was willing to sacrifice his own life and almost did. And the concept of the sacrifice of ultimately people's blood, and it wasn't their wish to sacrifice their lives, but they were willing to sacrifice their lives if it meant losing their lives because they didn't fear the reprisal of those who tried to steer them away from the one thing that mattered, which was proclaiming their belief in their one true God. So it's a concept. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. These are some quotes. I welcome you to take a look at the Facebook group, Fear of God, that Mark Townsend has. He shares amazing quotes on this page. As long as you can just join the Facebook application and then join the group, you can see things. They don't block people from joining the group. of course, it depends on if you break the rules. So breaking the rules means you come in and say foul words or something like that, then of course you're not welcome. But as long as time, place, and manner, you're reasonably a person of desiring character, it should be fine. So please, you're welcome to join. Just follow Facebook's community rules, and there's so much to learn from others who are sharing stuff on that page, that group. We also welcome you to look at the Clearwater Baha'is page, where we've got some videos on time prophecies. And again, the session today focused on the fear of God, because ultimately speaking, if you have this love of God and you fear no one else, and that is your prime motivator, these prophecies, they make sense. But once you start thinking, what do people think about me when I say something, it's not going to help you. It's just going to hurt you. You're going to just fall back into what everyone else wants to tell you reality is. You need to see with your own eyes, hear with your own ears, and see the truth for yourself, not through the eyes of another. So, Mark, thank you again. We hope you all have a beautiful Sunday. And again, please check out the Facebook group, Fear of God. Best wishes, everyone.
Thank you, John. Nice to speak with all of you today.